Okay, so we left off on page 40, where we just saw the woman strike a match and burn herself. The question that we are answering first is on page 9. A woman goes up in flames on page 40, and we see this horde event up close on the top half of the page and from afar at the lower right. What effect is achieved in presenting this murder from two distinct vantage points? So the first question it's asking us is, why would Tim Hamilton, why would he make us so that we could see the woman here burning with all the details? We can see, just the severity of the event. And then as we move into the other panels, it moves a little farther away until we're so far away that all we see is this little yellow dot and this great big puff of smoke coming up into the air. And the answer is that Tim Hamilton wants the reader to know just the magnitude of this event, that this woman's actions are going to spread throughout the city and is going to, this is a spark, this is the moment that things will start to change for Montague and also will start to change for the whole city as Montague kind of figures things out. So it is supposed to show just the magnitude of her actions. Right, so that's the first question. The second question in that number 9 is, why does the woman decline Montague's earlier offer on page 38 to come along with him, thereby instead choosing to die? And then we can go back to page 38, and he asks her at the bottom, at the top, he says, "You can come with me." She says, "No, thank you anyway." Why does she says, "Go on, I want to stay here," with showing the match. Why does she want to stay? All right, so that's the question. Why does she choose to die? The answer is that she chooses to die because she wants to have the control of her own life. She's an independent, free thinker, clearly because she still owns the books, and so she's kind of making a statement in what she's doing, proving it to herself and to those there at the scene that she means business, and that she would sacrifice herself for the importance of allowing books in this society. And the answer for the next one kind of goes along with this. What does her speech on page 35 mean? "We shall this day light such a candle," and so forth. So she has her back here on page 35. She says, "Play the man, Master Ridley. We shall this day light such a candle. By God's grace, in England, as I trust shall never be put out." And then we find out on page 41 from Beatty here that he knows actually what the quote was that she was saying. It says, "She said some crazy thing when we came in the door." That's Montague speaking. "Play the man, Master Ridley." And then Beatty here says, "A man named Latimer said that to a man named Nicholas Ridley as they were being burnt alive at Oxford for heresy on October 16th, 1555. So, if she's quoting this event where these two men were being burned alive for heresy, meaning they were going against the church, so if they're being burnt alive and they said they're starting a candle that can't be put out in all of England, right? We shall this day light such a candle. Now that's a metaphor, right? They're being burned alive, so they're talking about themselves literally being the candle. All right, and that's kind of what this woman is doing here. She's being a candle. You can see the candle that she's starting. Candles have smoke that come off of them, just like that. And then she says, "By God's grace in England trust shall never be put out," meaning that she knows that her actions are going to spread and make a statement, and people are going to see her as someone who fought for the right to have books. All right, so that is the number 9. Oh, and the last question on number 9 says, what can you say about Beatty's interpretation on page 41 of her words and what his commentary says about his character? So we look at the top of page 41. He says, I'm full of bits and pieces. Most fire captains have to be. So the fact that Beatty knew about this event, that this man named Nicholas Ridley said this to, or Latimer said this to Nicholas Ridley, what does that tell you about Beatty's character? What does that tell you about maybe Beatty's knowledge? How does he know this? As a reader, it makes me question, has he read books before? Like, how would he know this? So it just kind of makes us skeptical of Beatty's character. Okay, so we're going to continue reading, so please follow along. He stirred in bed. Montague says, Mildred, do you know that girl I was telling you about? Clarice, her name is. I haven't seen her for a few days. And Mildred says, oh, I know the one you mean. I meant to tell you. Whole family moved out somewhere. She's gone for good. I think she's dead. Run over by a car 4 days ago. Now I see Montague's face. We couldn't be talking about the same girl. Same girl, McClellan. 4 days ago. Why didn't you tell me? I forgot all about it, Mildred says, and we have a close-up of Montague's eye. He had chills and fever in the morning. You can't be sick. You were all right last night. No, I wasn't all right, Montague says. Bring aspirin, he says. You've got to get up. It's noon. You've slept 5 hours later than usual. Will you turn the parlor off? He says. That's my family, she said. Will you turn it off for a sick man? So, we have here two things I want to mention. First thing I want to mention is Mildred says that the TV family is her real family, which just continues to show the disconnect between Mildred and her husband Montague. And it's something that we talked about, right? Like that in order to have good relationships, you have to be compassionate and you have to be working with that other person and not behind a screen. So that's one thing I wanted to talk about. The other thing is I forgot to show you. You may have noticed down here, Montague has a book that he slid under his pillow. And then if you go back even farther, for when the books are falling down the stairs, you see Montague pick one up and then slide it into his coat pocket. All right, so he's actually taken a book home with him. All right, top of page 43. I'll turn it down, she said. That's my favorite program, Mildred says. What about the aspirin? Oh. Did something happen? She asks. A fire drill is all. I had a nice evening. What doing? The parlor. What was on? Programs. What programs? He says. Some of the best ever. And then we see him leaning over and getting sick onto the floor. Why'd you do that? Mildred says. We burnt an old woman with her books, he says. It's a good thing the rug's washable. Aren't you going to ask me about last night? What about it? We burnt a woman. You should have seen her, Millie. She shouldn't have had books. It was her responsibility. She should have thought of that. You weren't there. You didn't see. There must be something in books to make a woman stay in a burning house. She was simple-minded. She was as rational as you and I, more so perhaps, and we burnt her. This is the day you go on the early shift. You should have gone 2 hours ago. You don't expect me to call Captain Beatty, do you? You must, says Montague. I can't call him. I can't tell him I'm sick. You're not sick, Mildred says. He reached under his pillow. The hidden book was still there. Mildred, how would it be if, well, maybe I quit my job for a while. You want to give up everything? After all these years of working because one night some woman and her books? Well, now you've done it. Look who's here. So we see Mildred peering out the window, and someone's coming in the door. Turn the page. It's Captain Beatty who has come by. Now, she makes it sound like, and so does Captain Beatty makes it sound like, he just came on his own accord, but I believe that Mildred actually called Beatty earlier while Montag was asleep to get Beatty to come over. So Beatty says, "Thought I'd come by and see how the sick man is. I've seen it all. You were going to call for a night off. Well, take the night off." "How'd you guess?" says Montag. When will you be well?" Beatty asked. "Tomorrow, the next day maybe, first of the week. Every fireman, sooner or later, hits this. They only need understanding to know how the wheels run. When did it all start, you ask, this job of ours? I'd say it really got started around the Civil War. We didn't get along well until photography came into its own. Then motion pictures, radio, television." So before we move on from this page, I just want to point out that we see all this smoke circling into the room from Beatty's pipe. Smoke seems to be a recurring image throughout this book. We saw this. All right, well, we see this smoke here. Now we see some more smoke. So it seems to be a recurring image. If we read on, once books appealed to a few people, here, there, everywhere. They could afford to be different. The world was roomy. But then the world got full of eyes and elbows and mouths, quadruple population, films and radios, magazines, books leveled down to a sort of paste pudding form. Picture it, 19th century man with his horses, dogs, cats, slow motion. Then in the 20th century, speed up your camera, condensations, digests. Everything boils down to the snap ending. Classics cut to fill a 2-minute book column. So, if we look at this down here, we have Hamlet for Dimwits, Time Magazine, Classic Comics, Moby Dick, and Classic Comics, Treasure Island. What is the irony in that Beatty is talking about how these books that used to be considered good literature have been run down and kind of suppressed into comic books? The irony is that this book itself is a comic book. So it's ironic that we're reading a comic book about how books used to be text, but now had been kind of succinct into into comic books. And it's kind of like when I read this, all I can think about is kind of like what we do now. I mean, we have Spark Notes, we have Cliff Notes. We don't actually have to go home and read the book. We can just get a quick summary of it because we don't want to take the time to read the literature and really appreciate it. Other things that I'm thinking about are like sound bites. Things like Twitter, 140 characters. Cut it down short. We don't want long dialogue. I just want like immediate satisfaction. So he's kind of talking about this and back in the 1950s, and look at where we are today. It's almost like Ray Bradbury kind of saw the future coming. All right, next page. Politics, 1 column, 2 sentences, more sports for everyone, group spirit fun, and you don't have to think, eh? Organize, and super organized, super sports. The mind drinks less, highways full of crowds going somewhere, nowhere. The gasoline refugee. Now let's take up the minorities in our civilization. Don't step on the toes of the dog lovers, the cat lovers, doctors, Mormons, Swedes, Brooklynites, people from Mexico. The bigger your market, the less you handle controversy. Remember that. Authors, full of evil thoughts, lock up your typewriters. They did. Magazines became a nice blend of vanilla tapioca. Books, so the damned snobbish critics said, were dishwater. No wonder books stopped selling. The public, knowing what it wanted, let the comic books survive. So let's just talk about this page for a minute. He's talking about just like what happened in the past and how it came to be this way. And he's talking about how, super sports, people don't have to think, they could just sit there and watch. And, the thing about sports is that it unites people. So, having sports, big, huge sports centers were good for kind of having people just focus on what makes them happy and not really thinking too much about it. Talk about the gasoline refugee, meaning that people were just constantly traveling and called the gasoline refugee because it's almost like gasoline had a hold over them, meaning that they just never were really satisfied in one place. He talks about not offending people and that people stopped writing good books because they were afraid of offending people, and if they offended people, then people weren't going to buy them, right? So he said the bigger your market, the less you handle controversy. So they just wanted to sell products, so they didn't put out anything that was controversial or anything that might have just made anyone unhappy. So they only put out stuff that was good and happy so that they could sell more and become richer. All right, next page. And the three-dimensional sex magazines, of course. There you have it, Montag. It didn't come from the government down. There was no dictum, no declaration. Technology, mass exploitation, and minority pressure carried the trick. Montag says, get away. Thanks to them, you can stay happy all the time. Yes, but what about the firemen then? You surely remember. The boy in your own school class, who was exceptionally bright, did most of the reciting and answering while the others sat, hating him. So before we turn the page, we see Mildred's face. She is shocked, and it's because she just felt the book under Montag's pillow. So she's shocked and worried. Actually, there's a question on this page. Question 10. Question 10 says, look at the two-faced image in the middle right panel on page 49. Montag wears a certain look on his visage, which means his face. Mildred wears a completely different look. Why does Mildred's look differ so dramatically? Well, we just answered that, right? The answer is that she discovered the book that Montag is hiding. The question also asks, what is she reacting to? We answered that. Explain how the tension of this moment is highlighted by the way in which these two faces have been drawn and positioned. And the tension has been drawn by making Mildred's face look just completely and utterly shocked, and having Montag's face look like cool, calm, and collected. So the juxtaposition of these two images right next to each other creates tension in the image. And the next question asks, is there a visual pun at work here about Montag behaving in a two-faced manner? And then explain. So the fact that we see two different faces, one half of each side, it is kind of showing Montag's two-faced or double personality that we had been discussing before, where there's this one part of him that is shocked and worried and questioning, and then this other part of him that's calm, cool, and collected and trying to make sure that he looks like normal, like the normal fireman or whatever. So we're definitely seeing that two-faced personality in Montag in that particular panel. So I'll give you a few seconds to finish up writing your answers for number 10. And let's go ahead and turn the page. They just got done talking about the really smart boy in class, that everyone else, he answered all the questions and everyone else just like hated him because he knew all the answers. Wasn't it this bright boy you selected for beatings and tortures after hours? Of course it was. Not everyone born free and equal, as the Constitution says, but everyone made equal. Each man the image of every other, then all are happy. So, a book is a loaded gun in the house next door. Burn it. Take the shot from the weapon. Who knows might be the target of the well-read man. Me, I won't stomach them for a minute. So up here he's talking about the smart boy, and he says, instead of continuing to make people smart, we just kept everyone dumb. We just stopped educating people so that they were all equal. Because if we are educating people, then some will inevitably be smarter than others, and that makes people unhappy, so let's just not educate them at all. All right? What do we want in this country above all? People want to be happy, isn't that right? That's all we live for, isn't it? For pleasure, for titillation. So there's a question 11 on this page. Question 11 says, consider these rhetorical questions which Beatty asks the bedridden Montag on page 50. Rhetorical questions, right, are these ones right here that he just asked. And a rhetorical question means something that Beatty asks but doesn't necessarily really want the answer to. What do we want in this country above all? People want to be happy. Isn't that right? That's all we live for, isn't it? And so the question asks, could Beatty's outlook be applied to the way we actually live in this country now? Does his admittedly cynical take on Americans and their lifestyles make sense or ring true to you? And why or why not? So take a few minutes to answer that question, whether or not you think Beatty's outlook about how people don't really care about the negative stuff. They kind of ignore all the bad stuff that happens just so they can focus on the happy. Write whether or not you believe you agree with Beatty's outlook that it could be applied to today. Okay, so the last question of this particular number 11 here is, who are the happiness boys then? Beatty refers to himself and his fellow firemen as the happiness boys on the next page. And, you know, the people that the firemen are the ones who burn the books and therefore make everyone happy. Their job is to make sure that people remain happy. Who do you think then in American society, today's American society, would be considered the happiness boys? In my opinion, the happiness boys might be the government. You know, they might want to just make laws or do certain things that just might make everyone happy. But I also think that a really good example of this is Hollywood, right? All of those really rich, famous actors, they give us a false sense of reality. They make it seem like it's normal to have expensive cars and expensive jewelry and fame and fortune and being popular. They make it sound like that's, or they make it look like that's what life is supposed to be like. They kind of give us a false sense of what happiness really is. Yeah, we go to the movies and it kind of is an escape from reality for 2 hours, but then you have to wake back up and you have to go back into your, go back to your normal life. So I think that Hollywood does pose itself as a bit of a happiness boys, like just there to make people happy, not necessarily make them think. Like enjoy life on a deeper level. Okay. So let's keep reading. Top of page 51. There was a girl next door. She's gone now, I think dead. She was different. How did she happen? Clarice McClellan? We've a record on her family. We've watched them carefully. Hereditary and environment are funny things. You can't rid yourselves of all the odd ducks in just a few years. The girl, she was a time bomb. She didn't want to know how a thing was done, but why. You ask why to a lot of things, and you wind up very unhappy indeed. The poor girl's better off dead. Yes, dead, Montague answers. Remember, Montague, we're the happiness boys. We stand against the small tide of those who want to make everyone unhappy with conflicting theory and thought. One last thing. At least once in his career, every fireman gets an itch. What do the books say? Well, Montague, take my word for it, I've had to read a few in my time to know what I was about, and the books say nothing. Montague says, well, then what if a fireman accidentally, really not intending anything, takes a book home with him? Beatty says, a natural error. We let the fireman keep the book 24 hours. If he hasn't burned it by then, we simply come burn it for him. Did you hear? And then Beatty leaves, and then Montague says, did you hear Beatty? He knows all the answers. Fun is everything. And now we see here, Montague is pulling books down that he's been hiding in his vent. So he has more than just one. And yet I kept sitting there saying to myself, I'm not happy. I'm not happy. I'm sorry, I didn't really think, but now it looks as if we're in this together, Montague says to Mildred. Mildred, she seized a book and ran toward the kitchen incinerator. No, Millie! No, wait! And then you can see them struggling over the book. And then he slaps her. Listen, give me a second, will you? We can't do anything. We can't burn these. I want to look at them, at least look at them once. Then, if what the captain says is true, we'll burn them together. Believe me, we'll burn them together. You must help me. We've got to start something here, somewhere here, figuring out why we're in such a mess. You and the medicine knights, and me and my work. We're heading right for the cliff, Millie. God, I don't want to go over. I need you so much right now. Montague continues, Clarice, I talked to her. You never talk to her, and men like Beatty are afraid of her. I can't understand it. I kept putting her alongside the firemen in the house last night, and I suddenly realized I didn't like them at all, and I didn't like myself at all anymore. So then there's a noise coming out from like the house or from the door, and it says, Mrs. Montague, someone here, Mrs. Montague. And then it says it again, Mrs. Montague, someone here. And we see the book sprawled on the floor, and we also see the door here, and we only see like two creepy little hands, like shadows coming through the door. Beatty! It can't be him, Montague said. He's come back, Millie says. Someone here. We won't answer, Montague says. He'll come in and burn us and the books, Millie says. The front door voice faded at last. There was silence. It says, let's see what this is, Montague says. It is computed that 11,000 persons have at several times suffered death rather than submit to break their eggs at the smaller end. And we can see that he's reading the book Gulliver's Travels. Let's see what this is. It is computed that 11,000 persons have at several times suffered death rather than submit to break their eggs at the smaller end. And we can see that he is reading Gulliver's Travels here. What does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. The captain was right. Here now, we'll start over again at the beginning. All right, and we have question 12 on this page. In question 12, describe the magnified page presentation found on page 57. What is Montague reading, and why do you think Hamilton chose to zoom in on the page under Montague's thumb? Where else, if anywhere else, in Hamilton's artwork, do we perceive the world or its components exclusively through Montague's point of view? So the answer to number 12 then is, like they're talking about this panel right here at the bottom. It's a magnified image of what's next to his thumb here. And the question is asking what's the significance? And the significance is that we are looking, this panel right here, we are looking through Montague's point of view. We are looking through his eyes. So this is, one place in the book where we look through Montague's point of view. Another place is if we look back to page 21. These two panels right here are directly from Montague's point of view. They're both these women looking straight at us, right into our eyes, and we are looking at them as if we are Montague himself. Another place where we see Montague's point of view is on page 40, right here. That is Montague's point of view as well. We're looking right at the woman. So the question is asking us, what is the significance of that? Why do we see through Montague's point of view in these particular pages, on pages 21, 40, and 57? The answer is because these are all significant moments in Montague's life. These are all very important moments to him, so we are seeing them through his point of view, and that is how Hamilton is kind of telling us these specific times in the novel are significant. So I'll let you finish writing your answer to number 12. Okay, so now that you are done answering number 12, that is technically the end of part 1. So the sub is going to hand you out a packet of Captain Beatty's monologue. You are to work on that independently, and whatever you don't finish today, we will finish up in class on Monday. Have a great weekend, guys.